Hi everyone, I'm back with another book review. This one is going to be on A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. I just posted my review for the first one, and this is going to be for the second one. This one is also all tabbed up, and I actually did, like, right before I finished this one, I went ahead and just bought the rest of them. So now I have all of them, and these are honestly some of my favorite, like, series covers. I love that they're all similar, but they're still all different colors. Like, that is my aesthetic. Like, that is me. And a random thing that I thought was really weird. So this book has like 600 pages, like just over 600 pages. But the third one also has just over 600 pages, like 660, 70 something, I don't know. But it's like significantly smaller than this one. It's weird. Like, the pages are a lot smaller. You know how pages in the Bible are like really thin? They're kind of, I don't know what that's about. And this one's also like heavy. But anyways, not about that one. This video is going to be on A Court of Mist and Fury. I finished it last night. I got it Monday. I finished this in like 4 days. I was going. So before I continue, I gave this book a 10 out of 10. I loved it. I was thoroughly entertained and invested in all of that the entire time, from the very beginning to the very end. I enjoyed literally every second of it. So I mentioned this in the last one. I have this review journal that I like write all my thoughts in. And so I literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages back to back. So 14 pages of notes that I wrote on this book. I don't want to edit a hour-long video, so I'm not going to discuss every single little fact that I had in this book, because that's just a lot. So I'm in the middle and almost done with editing my review for the first one. And it's funny because I did notice that I said Rysand instead of Rysand. Apparently that's how you pronounce his name, is Rysand. But for the life of me, that does not sound right. When I try and say it, when I try and read it, when they had the shortened version of his name and it said Rhys, so R-H-Y-S, I read it as Rhys. But when they said the Rysand, I just could not like wrap my head around saying that. So I'm going to try and just say Rhys, because I cannot say Rysand. Like, it just does not come naturally. So no disrespect whatsoever. It's such a funny pronunciation of that name and not how I thought it was going to be done. So before I continue, I will say Rhys is literally has become one of my favorite fictional husbands. He has been added to the list somewhat near the top. Oh my god, my favorite character in this book, and every single character was amazing. I absolutely adore characters like his who are just so good, like, and so selfless and so like willing to give, but also, like I kind of said in the first one, still have this really harsh exterior. And in his case, he didn't have that exterior with Feyre and his friends, his inner circle that we were introduced to. I'll talk about that in a minute. But a few times we did have to see him kind of go back and forth from that, versus in the first book where we only saw that Night Lord exterior of his. So this book I thought was so great in showing us the progression of who his character is, and the progression of Feyre's character, and the progression of their relationship with each other. I don't know if I would call this one like a slow burn, but I mean, it kind of was. Their relationship wasn't like, they didn't do anything about it until the very end, like literally within the last 100 pages, and there were over 600 pages in this book. And then especially learning that Rhys literally has kind of been in love with her for about 3 years. He didn't even know her, but she was his light and she was his salvation, and he even told her that, and I was like but I think I'm just gonna kind of go through my notes and then just like talk about whatever I want to talk about, because I cannot come up with like a cohesive way to make my book reviews. I think randomly, so that's what these books kind of become. I did write, in the very beginning, it was interesting, and it reminded me of another book that I've read called Red Rising. If you've read it, by Pierce Brown, one of my favorite series of all time. My brother had me read it, but anyways, it was really interesting. So we know that Feyre is a fairy now. She's only been a fairy for about 3 months, because in the beginning of this book, she is going to get married to Tamlin, but their relationship is really rocky. Like, Tamlin is not around very much. Being under the mountain really changed the both of them, and Tamlin kind of for the worse. I ended up really disliking Tamlin in this book because of the decisions that he made. In a way, I understood where he was coming from, but that didn't mean that he was right in how he was treating Feyre. So in the very beginning, they're gonna get married, right? She's very lonely. She's only talking to this one priestess named Ianth. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but she doesn't have any friends to really talk to. Like I said, Tamlin and Lucien are away all the time. They're trying to put together this wedding, and she's really sick and tired of just being stuck in that house and wearing these cute fancy dresses and not being able to go anywhere without an escort. And she's just really getting tired of just becoming like a soon-to-be trophy wife, which I feel like Tamlin only wanted her to be that role for him. I do feel that his feelings towards her were definitely love, but they really went towards obsession versus love, because when you truly love somebody, like, you let them go, right? And he refused to let her out of his sight, out of his protection, out of anything. So we realized that Rhys was like really saving her when it was their wedding day, and she was in her big ugly dress, and she was in her mind just like screaming out, "No, help me, somebody save me." And then Rhys showed up. And so that was quite the way to start off this book. So he waited about 3 months to actually engage in that bargain that he made with her. So we learned that he essentially saves her. Like, they have a bond with each other through that mark that he put on her after they made that bargain with each other. And so she doesn't realize that he can hear her, and like he can hear her thoughts, and he can like hear her reaching out and crying for help, and he could hear her with her nightmares and all of that, and hear her throwing up, and he couldn't do anything about it. So he felt horrible. So that one moment that he was able to finally hear her and ask for help, he jumped on that opportunity to actually go and help her, and he ended up like saving her. But I have a few notes here that I thought were interesting. So Feyre has only been a fairy for a few months, right? She is trying to get used to her new body, to her new life, to her new immortality. And I thought it was really interesting because in the books with the fairies, only the fairies, because it's in their religion basically, that about the cauldron, like they'll say it in vain, I guess, like as a curse. And it was really funny because Feyre said that a couple times. She was like, "Oh, by the cauldron," or whatever. So I thought that was really interesting that she just picked up on that vocabulary so fast. Because like I was saying, there's a book called Red Rising where, spoiler alert for that book, 10 out of 10, 100 out of 10, y'all should go read that book. It is amazing. But a quick little spoiler. So when Darrow becomes a gold, when he's made into a gold in that book, so there's the lower class that say bloody damn, and then the upper class say gory damn. And so when he was transformed from the lower to the higher class, like literally physically, he let it slip 1 or 2 times. He would say bloody damn. And so I thought that was interesting that that Feyre has only been a fairy for like 3 months, and she's already like picked up on that kind of vocabulary, like it's been hers her entire life. I feel like people don't really pick up on that kind of stuff that easily, but I don't know. So throughout the book, I was I wasn't happy to see her suffer, but as a reader who likes complex characters and for things to be dealt with, I liked that she was still kind of suffering from everything that happened under the mountain. She still had some serious PTSD, and it wasn't brushed away in the beginning of the story. That was actively dealt with in her everyday life, and especially with Rhys when she would when they would talk about it, or that one moment when she woke him up from his nightmare. Beautiful. But I was glad that her character didn't just kind of brush that to the side, because that was like a huge and traumatizing moment for her. So I was happy to see that didn't just go away in the wake of this story. She was actively dealing with it. And just as a random side note, I don't know if I talked about this in my other video, but I just love the fact that Rhys has violet eyes. Every single time that I read that, I think of Yennefer from The Witcher, and her eyes were flippin' gorgeous. I absolutely loved her face and her eyes. And after I watched The Witcher, I was like, you know what? If I was ever like a fantasy person, I would want violet eyes. That would be my eye color of choice. Mine are literally so brown that they're almost black. You can kind of see that they're brown in the light, but they're just very dark. I have very dark hair and eyes, and it would be nice to have a little bit of color. So every other page I would just write down like my thoughts, but I have one on page 54. So when she first goes to the night court with Rhys the first time, she's literally like, the first time obviously she wasn't going to like I know and I knew that her and Rhys were gonna get together. Like, I was just spoiled on that, but obviously I didn't think it was gonna happen like the first week that she was there. But I was surprised that within that first week she was just comfortable there. She was honestly just comfortable, like, in what she was wearing, and where, like, she didn't feel scared, she didn't feel trapped, at least not in the same way as she did in the spring court. So it was just really interesting that she is, you know, was basically kidnapped again, but she's not uncomfortable at the night court with Rhys. And the other thing that I just loved the first week that she was there was that Rhys wanted her to learn how to read. We learned that he does need her for the war. He does need her for certain things, but he also just wanted her to have that skill. I remember at one part she was like, oh yeah, that like, you just need me to read so that I can help you with this. And he was like, yeah, but I mean, it's also just a good life skill for you to have. Like, you should know how to read. And throughout the book, I just kept thinking, I'm like, okay, Rhys is doing with one thing, and it's a complete total opposite of what Tamlin would do. So Rhys wants her to better herself, and wants her to learn how to do things, and wants her to, you know, master certain skills. And Tamlin just didn't want her to do anything. He wanted her to look pretty and stay in his manner and just not do anything. And that was one of the huge differences between these two men. And I'll talk about it later, but she ends up admitting to herself that Tamlin was just not good for her, and that he was the first person that showed her any bit of kindness, which is why she fell in love with him. Because even when I was reading the first book, and especially in this book, I was like, girl, you knew him for like not that long, like, and you literally went on your deathbed for this man that you did not know that well. Like, you were in puppy love, you were not in deep love. That shows her character, but I was like, you literally died for this man. And then in the first week that she's there, we also are introduced to Morgan, which is Rhys's cousin. I loved her character. I thought she was fantastic. I do hope that we get a little bit of more insight into her backstory, because we do know her backstory, but I would love for her to tell Feyre like more about her past life, because she's just such an interesting character, and I love how she holds herself. And to me, she seemed very like, when she met Feyre for the first time, she very much felt like Alice in Twilight. I'm gonna make a few references to Twilight, but to me, when she first met when she first met Feyre, it was very much like the meeting in Twilight when Alice meets Bella for the first time, when they actually like say hi to each other in the house. Because Feyre was very reserved and very like, oh yeah, like hi or whatever, and Morgan and Alice were just like, oh, we're gonna be best friends, like we're just gonna have all sorts of fun. And I just thought that was funny. So up until about like halfway through the book, I have a lot of notes here talking about how like all the things that Rhys would do, and I would like question it, like, well, does he really want the best for her? Like, what are his motives and all that? So I have a note here that says he sees that she is strong and capable and has skills, and he needs her to help. He isn't condescending because she's a woman or was a human. He even said that she could be a high lady, even though Tamlin made it seem impossible, because she brought that up to Tamlin either the beginning, I think it was at the very beginning of this book, and he shut her up. Like, he was like, that's not even possible, don't even think about it, it's never gonna happen. And she talked to Rhys, and he's like, yeah, it could happen, that's a possibility. So it's like, dude, who's the better man? So she's there at the night court for the first week, and I thought it was so sad, because she's able to go back to the spring court, right, at the end of that week, and the first thing that Tamlin does is interrogate her. He doesn't, like, he, like, hugs her and whatever, but he doesn't, like, make sure that she's okay, really. Like, mentally, he looks at her, like, to make sure of anything, as if he could tell physically, but he doesn't even, like, give her time to rest or anything like that. He doesn't have a moment alone with her. He just interrogates her, and then he's like, he still doesn't want her to master any of these newfound powers of hers. He doesn't want her to protect herself. He again was like, oh yeah, that I'm gonna protect you, like you don't have to do anything. Why? You're not even around her most of the time. Why wouldn't you want her, a woman who is completely perfectly capable of learning and mastering these skills? He just completely wants her indebted to him and connected to him, and just doesn't want her to be any kind of independent. Then the part that really pissed me off with Tamlin was on page 100 when she mentioned her concern over marrying him, and he completely freaked out. Like he ruined her room, and he just had a meltdown. So she was able to literally physically protect herself with the shield that she put up. That's a gift, or not a gift, but a power from one of the High Lords when she was resurrected. So she was able to protect herself, but from her fiance. Like that's not okay. That is literally abusive, that you blow up on her and literally almost physically harm her on top of whatever you're doing to her mentally. She goes on to say, I'm just checking from the book, she goes on to say that, oh, that he apologizes to me over and over again. Honey, he's an abuser. That's what he is. I don't really care. Oh, and I have another note here. This is on page 105. I am so, throughout the entire book, I was so entertained by the fact that Rhys would verbally respond to whatever it is that she was thinking. It caught me off guard every single time, and I just loved it. Even she was never like actually angry that he was like in her mind, because she had every power in herself to just turn it off. She could have shut down those mental shields, but she would just forget sometimes. And I just thought that was really funny. And on page 109, what was the context? Because he says to her, there was a part, he says a lot more like romantic things in the end of the book, but there's a part where he says, but I'll always make time for you. And that was just, I don't know, that was just a little thing, but that was just sweet. I don't know. There's another part that Feyre was saying that I highlighted, and I thought it was really funny. Not funny, but it's when she's learning to read, right? And she's like, but it had filled my time, giving me quiet, steadfast company with those characters who did not exist and never would, but somehow made me feel less alone. And I was like, that's why we read, is it not? That is why I have hundreds of books in my room right now. Okay, so this part thoroughly pissed me off when I was reading it. And so on page 123, Feyre is back in the Spring Court for the second or third time after she's gone with Rhys to the Night Court, and she has had enough. She's like, Tamlin and Lucien are leaving, and she's like, I need you to take me wherever it is you're going. I'll hide, I won't get hurt, I just need you to let me get out of this house. I feel trapped, like let me go with you. And he refuses, naturally, and so she is like actually begging him to let her out, and he just refuses. And so he ends up actually just leaving, but he has this like ward or something on the house so that she cannot leave. She has a panic attack. Like he triggers like this horrible sensation inside of her, and she feels like she is under the mountain again. She has the PTSD that is coming back, the trauma is coming back. She makes this like black, I don't know what, around her, and she feels completely trapped, and that is her number one fear. Tamlin literally knows this. She died for him, and how dare he? I was so mad, because how dare he? This woman literally laid her life down for you. She was murdered for you, and you're gonna do the one thing that you know like scares her the most. Like, how? That is not love. Anyway, so the only thing that didn't make me like throw my book across the room when that happened was that Morgan freed her. It was Rhys, but he couldn't actually go into the Spring Court, so he had Mort go in and grab her. So they take her back to the Night Court, and they're like, you're free, you're safe, don't worry about it, you can go back, but you don't have to right now, you're not there. And so they basically save her, they free her from that place. And like another part where he was reading her mind on page 149, I guess she has a fleeting thought of like having it all end, or she's like, oh, something about if it were all to end, or if he was to take me, I guess it wouldn't be that bad. And he snaps at her, and he's like, don't you ever think like that again. No, it would not be better. And then on the next page, we actually get the word for what it is that Rhys can do, and it's called Demati. I think it's pronounced Demati. Sounds Latin. So apparently that's the name for what he is. And then, okay, so the other little moment that so there's so many things with their wings in this book that I just love. It's like a part of the Illyrians. It's a part of Rhys. It's a part of Cassian and Azriel that we meet later on. But I just loved all of the aspects of the wings that we saw in the book. And so there's one part where Rhys is carrying her up, and he puts his wings around her like to carry her, but he senses that she like tenses up because she's like, oh no, a cage. I think I swallowed spit down the wrong tube while I was talking. Oh my god. I'm fine. Okay. But look what I was saying, when he put his wings around her, and she was like, oh no, it's a cage. And then he immediately like pulled them back because he sensed that she was scared. Oh, and then on page 156, that was one of my favorite parts of the book. Is when Feyre herself is talking to Rhys and she admits to herself. Let's see. I shall read it. Let's take off this thing. It says, maybe it was some shred of courage or recklessness, or I was so high above everything that no one save Rhys and the wind could hear. But I said, I'm thinking that I must have been a fool in love to allow myself to be shown so little of the spring court. I'm thinking there's a great deal of that territory I was never allowed to see or hear about, and maybe I would have lived in ignorance forever like some pet. I'm thinking, and then ... I'm thinking that I was a lonely, hopeless person, and I might have fallen in love with the first thing that showed me a hint of kindness and safety. And I'm thinking maybe he knew that. Maybe not actively, but maybe he Tamlin wanted to be that person for someone, and maybe that worked for who I was before. Maybe it doesn't work for what I am now. And I was like, Feyre, yes. I loved that part because I was like, yep, she's never gonna go back to him. She knows what she is worth. She knows who she is. And I was like, we never get that kind of like character development in like a YA, because they're always trying to make excuses for like the men in YA sometimes, like especially if there's like a love triangle or something. But no, I loved that. I loved that character development within Feyre in that scene. I was just like, it was beautiful. Oh, and then another favorite part, started on page 170, I guess, or before that, but when Rhys introduces Feyre to his inner circle, so to Mor and Amren and Cassian and Azriel, I don't know, that entire scene when they were having dinner was magical. I loved meeting them. I knew of Cassian because I the one spoiler that I do know is that him and Nesta do get together. I know that. I don't know how, I don't know when or why or under what circumstances, but I just know that they do. So it was just fabulous, like learning about all these characters, getting deeper into Rhys's backstory a little bit. I love scenes like that where we just get like an information dump and just overload me with information. I love it. I want to know everything. Then we get another scene with Mor and Feyre, and she's like, you do what you love, what you need. And Feyre was like, oh my god, I think I have a female friend. I have a friend. And I just thought it was cute because I was like, this poor thing has basically been bullied by one of her sisters and neglected by both her entire life, and she finally found a friend in Rhys's cousin, and I just thought that was really sweet. So we even got a couple scenes that were just magic, when Feyre is having a really bad nightmare, and Rhys could probably just hear her anyways, but definitely heard her through the bond that she was like not having it. So he goes to her aid and he like wakes her up and is like, hey, you were having a bad dream. And she like goes to throw up because she just has that visceral reaction. And he was there for her, and he was holding her hair back, and he was helping her like feel better. And I just thought that was so nice because Tamlin never did that for her. And I just love that he was there for her. I loved him in this entire book so much. Oh, and then we get that scene with the bone carver that was really interesting and really scary. So they get their information that they need to continue on with the rest of the book in terms of like the war and the cauldron and the books and whatever. So at this point in the story, we finally get some conflict into like a world war. So that's going to involve the fairies and the king and like the mortals, and it's going to be a whole thing. And the whole war is probably going to happen. Well, it has to happen, right? In this next book, because this was just leading up to it. I'm so excited for the third book. And it was really funny, on page 218, when Rhys sends Feyre to go see the weaver and get back the ring. She didn't know that she was going for a ring. She didn't know that she was going to pick her own wedding ring out of a crazy lady's house thought that was funny. But I was reading that scene and I'm like, this feels like when Merida came across that witch in the woods in Brave, and she was like gonna get a potion to turn her mom into a bear. I don't know. So on page 228, they have a conversation, and like I was saying, how Tamlin didn't want Feyre to train. He didn't want her to do anything. And so after Feyre survives the Weaver, Rysand is like, okay, cool. So we're going to train you and you're going to learn how to fight and defend yourself. And I just thought that was yet another great thing, because Tamlin just did not want her to defend herself in the slightest. And Rysand, whatever, was all about it and was like, Cassian's going to teach you. I'm going to teach you. You're going to learn how to fight. You're going to learn how to read. You're going to learn how to defend yourself. And then on page 255 is when Feyre, Cassie, like the whole gang, they go have dinner with Nesta and Elaine because they need to ask them if they could borrow like the house basically so they could talk to the queens. But that whole conversation, or that whole dinner, was really funny because it was Cassian and Nesta's first like exchange of words, and they were already real feisty. Now on page 259, right after that, because they have to stay there before they go back, I thought it was really funny. So there's two beds, or there's two rooms. The one room that Rhys and Faye were gonna stay, and there was one bed. And I was like, oh my god, we're gonna have the stereotypical, what do we do if there's one bed and there's two of us? But then Rhys like magicked up another bed, and I was like, oh, you ruined it. I did love that both Feyre and Cassian, both Rhys and Cassian were really bothered by the way that Feyre's sisters treated her. And that goes because they care about Feyre, but also they both experience that kind of neglect as children. And they had to form their own family when they were kids. So the fact that Feyre's own flesh and blood treated her the way that they did not like that. They weren't willing to like let that go and like be cool with her sisters more than they had to be because of that. And then another thing that Tamlin didn't care to ask Feyre when he was like in his presence was when her birthday was. And Tamlin and Rhys asked her, and I just thought that was nice that he asked her when her birthday was. Then on page 265, he says, life is better when you're around, to Feyre. How freaking, oh, that was so sweet. Oh my god. Oh, and then we get that crazy scene where Feyre and Rhys are training together, and then the Attor, that guy, he shows up and attacks Feyre when she's by herself. And with that, Rhys knew that like somebody was going to attack her, so she got really mad and tried to attack Rhys, and she actually winnowed. So she's slowly learning different powers that she's able to do throughout the book, and I just thought that was really fun. Another thing that Rhys did, he sent her, oh my god, he sent her music while she was like dying in the dungeon, and he's like, I knew that you were suffering and you were just not doing great, so I wanted to give you something, because that's when they came across the people playing music in the town in Valaris, and she's like, wait, I recognize that. And he's like, yeah, I wanted to make sure that you were like okay, so it was the only thing I could do to give you some kind of like peace of mind, even for a minute. Also, I love their magic written notes that they just like write to each other, and just, I loved it. It was so funny. There's another part on page 296 that kind of coincides with my other favorite part, when Feyre was kind of admitting things to herself, and she writes, I had done everything for that love, in regards to with Tamlin. She's like, I had ripped myself to shreds, I had killed innocents and debased myself, and he had sat beside Amarantha on that throne, and he couldn't do anything, hadn't risked being caught until there was one night left, and all he wanted to do wasn't free me, but F me. And there was another part, I think later on in the book, or maybe this part, I don't remember, where Rhys is telling her that, or it might have been at the end when he's having that like total, like when he was telling her everything, but he was so angry that, and Feyre is just now kind of coming to realize that he was so angry that in that moment under the mountain in the first book, when he catches the two of them, Tamlin and Feyre, and the paint, right, that she's wearing is everywhere on the both of them. He was so angry that Tamlin chose to take that opportunity that he had alone with her to just like make out with her and like be sexual, versus actually just try and get her out and like make an attempt to have her escape. Rhys was so mad that he chose his own selfish needs over her safety. And it was kind of throughout the book, but at that moment I was just like, oh my god, he really loves her. And I love that man. I love that fairy man. Oh, and then we get to that scene. Oh my god. So these books are new adult, right? In new adult books, that means that there is or is not the possibility of like smut. And I was expecting more in this book, and second and the other one. I imagine there's more in like the other two. I don't know. So we get that scene. I think there was like what, 4 scenes in this entire book of like any of that. So like her with Tamlin initially in the very beginning, her with Rhys when they were on the throne, and then like chapter 55, which we'll get to. And then in the inn. But like, was there more than that? I mean, there was, I don't know. Anyways, that part where Rhys needs to go to the Court of Nightmares, and he told Feyre that she is going to need to act like his whore. She had agreed to it. She completely consented to whatever it is that she had to do. He wasn't going to do anything like horrible to her. She had to sit on his lap, like half naked, and he was just gonna like play with her and like play the part. And I mean, that whole scene was great. But I loved especially that while both of them were like doing what they were doing, that they were both kind of like comforting each other. So he like was touching her, and she could sense that he was kind of uncomfortable with doing this in front of people, and also just doing that with her period before each of them had even kind of like said anything or confirmed anything about the relationship, because they hadn't at that point. They have just been like flirting and dancing around each other at that point, but he wasn't completely comfortable with just doing that with her without like any of her consent. Like with the real them, this was obviously like something that they had to do. But I loved that they were comforting each other. She was telling him, she's like, you're kind, you're a good person, I trust you, like please don't feel bad. And he would like in the very beginning when he touched her and his hand was cold, and then he made it warm, or he I think he like kissed her like back here or something, like as a sorry. It was a good scene. Anyways, you know what I'm talking about. But anyways, oh, and then on page 422, I thought it was really funny. Rhysand and Feyre are having a conversation, and Rhys is like, what did he say? I think this is actually right after that scene, and Feyre kind of said some words that she shouldn't have, and Rhys was like, what is it that you want, Feyre? And he's like, what is it that you want? And I was like, okay, The Notebook, calm down.
What do you want? What do you want?
It's not that simple.
What do you want?
My mind works in references, so every time I see something and I just think of whatever else it makes me think of, that's how my brain works. I don't know. Oh, and then I have a note for page 451, but I loved how, so on top of Feyre confronting her PTSD and trauma, and confronting having to kill those innocents, and still dealing with everything that she went through under the mountain, I do love that we got several training scenes, because unlike in a lot of like YA books, we get that one chapter that's like, oh, well, I learned how to fight with so-and-so, and then he kept beating me down until I got up, and then I ran 10,000 miles, and then all of a sudden they're a master at whatever it is that they need to do. Throughout this entire book, up until that last moment that she really needed to fight, she was training, and she was constantly trying to get better, and she was constantly just trying to be better. And I thought that was great. And then we get to chapter 48, which was the inn with the one bed. Nice scene. But then after that, about 20 pages later, we finally realize, let me get to it, 493. Oh, this is when Rhys is hurt, and Feyre needs to go out and trap the cereal so that the cereal, Captain Crunch.
Crunchitize me, mon capitaine.
But she needs to go trap him so that she could learn how to fix him, because he's like dying because he got shot with ash arrows that had venom, like poison in them. So she needs to know how to fix him. And the cereal comes and is like, oh yeah, just have him chew up this pink thing by the pond or by the water, and give him your blood, and also something about your mate. And she's like, wait a minute, my mate, What do you mean? And at that moment, I was like jumping up and down in my bed because I was like, I knew it. I knew it. And then on 495 is when Reese, because she goes back to Reese immediately and is like, hey, you need to tell me what is happening. And he's like, yeah, that I had felt it for a while. He doesn't tell her until chapter 54 that he had been like dreaming of her, knew of her for like 5 years or 3 years before that. But at this point, he's like, yeah, that I felt it. Especially after you were made, and it really just hit me when we were talking at the end of the last book. And I was like, I knew it! So smart. No, but I totally guessed that. And I was like so happy that I was right. But I was also so happy that they finally admitted that they were mates. And I understand that Feyre was angry about that because she was kind of having these feelings too. And if he would have just said that, it would have validated things and they could have just been together from the start, or at least for a while. But yeah, so she gets really mad, poor thing, and then she takes him home. I thought it was kind of funny that she like makes sure that he's good enough to travel, and then he and then she just takes him back to the inn and like dumps him on the front step of where they were staying, and tells Moore to take her somewhere. She ends up taking her to that like cabin, that family cabin. And then we get chapter 54 that I really truly loved, and this was the chapter before the fancy chapter. But this is when Feyre has been in that cabin for about 5 days. Moore has seen her for about 3, and she's been painting, she's been thinking, she's just been having a lot of time for herself to think. Reese finally shows up to her at her doorstep, and apparently he flew there. He couldn't even winnow in because of the actual location, and he just wasn't feeling it. So he flew to her. That must have been like at least a day's worth of travel. But anyways, I thought that was lovely. And so that entire scene where he's just telling her his entire story. He's telling her when he thought of her 3 years ago. He's telling her when he saw her at the night festival in the spring court, that first time that she met him. And he's just admitting all of these things, that what happened to Claire, and just what happened with Amarantha, and why, just everything. He's telling her everything. And then my favorite, I loved on the last page of the chapter 54 and on the very first page of chapter 55, he tells her that he loves her. And then I felt so bad for Reese because she's kind of just like listening and like nodding her head and being like, okay. And then he finally admits that to her. And she like takes a moment to take it all in, and then she's like, I just wanted to let you know that I also love you, and like I'm honored to be your mate and all that stuff. And apparently he like was crying and like shuddered because she finally admitted that she loved him, and it like was overwhelming for him. And then they got down to business, but it was great all around. It was great. And I also thought it was great that because Reese, because Reese was saying that about his wings, like how they're sensitive, and like for other reasons, but also that he never felt comfortable exposing his wings during certain acts. So when he did with Feyre, it was really like telling of him because he was completely comfortable with her, trusted her with his life. And so the fact that he like let her touch his wings was a big deal. So they have their moment, and then a few pages later we finally get back to the scene, to that meeting with the queens, because they have the other half of the book that they need. And I can see why people don't like Nesta. She's not a very likable character. Up until this point, if you take everything that she says at face value, she's a very mean person. She's not very warm. She's very cold. She's just not a cool person. But the thing is, when I get these characters and when I see these characters, I'm like, you know what? I would like to dig further into your soul. What is it that is inside you that is so sensitive and broken that you are hiding it with this wall of meanness?
Let me in, please.
And so I think people who don't care to think of her as a complicated character do say that she is mean and cruel and cold. But I think there's more to her, which is why I'm really excited for the 5th book. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, the 5th book. Because I know that the last one is kind of like the end of a trilogy with Feyre. And I know she's in the last one, but I do also know that it's more focused on Nesta and Cassian. because the one spoiler that I know. But we get that scene where Nesta kind of like freaks out on the queens because they're like, we're not gonna give you the book. Sorry. Not even sorry. And Nesta like screams at them. She's like, you need to do the right thing and protect these people and protect my family. And she's like, so, and like, I feel like every girl knows this feeling when you are so frustrated that you start crying. So when she started crying while screaming at these queens, I was like, oh God, Nesta. I really liked her at that point. And then Cassian goes up to her and like wipes a tear from her face, and I was like, what has been happening here that between y'all? Like, I want to explore that more. And I was telling my friend, I thought it was really funny because to me, Cassian and Nesta's relationship feel very like Rosalie and Emmett, like in Twilight. Like Emmett, like Cassian's kind of like, not quite, but kind of the himbo. And then Rosalie or Nesta is like the mean girl who only has a soft spot for like the one guy. Okay, so we're finally getting to the end. And Feyre and Cassian are out and about walking, and she's talking to Cassian about her sister Nesta and how she doesn't think that she's like, I know how she seems, but I really do think that she just has a lot of hurt and feeling and love inside of her, that she is too afraid to let anybody like hurt her. And so she's telling Cassian, who they didn't really talk about anything about the relationship. I imagine we're gonna get more of it in the next one, especially since Nesta and Elaine are now fairies. We're gonna get into that. But so they're having a conversation, and I like that they have that conversation because I just really like Cassian's character. I would like to know more about him. But I was glad that they have it. So while they were having the conversation, Villaris is attacked, and it's because the queens ratted them out. I hate the queens. I cannot stand them. I hope they all die. But I was so happy that Feyre ended up killing the Ator. She said, for me and for Rhys and for Claire, and I was like, yes, girl, stab him. And then he like falls and lands on the ground and turns to like mush and gush, and I was like, yes. Then after that, after they're fighting, they need to go to the cauldron so that they can actually do all that. And then on page 577, Feyre says, and I realized how badly I'd been treated before if my standards had become so low. Because Rhys told her, she's like, it's up to you. It's your decision if you want to go and be this person to like save the world, basically, when they have to go to the cauldron. And she's like, if the freedom I'd been granted felt like a privilege and not an inherent right. Because Rhys was never her keeper, never anything but a friend until they were more. And he was just always a really like good person for her when they were not in a relationship and when they were. So I adore that man. My standards have now been even higher for real life men, and this has already happened with so many other books. and then oh my god, I'm trying not to scream, but we get to the part where we learn that Tamlin has been working with the king. Oh my god. And so he was working with the king, and he was like, yeah, I'll work with you if you promise that you can give me back Feyre when she comes. I'm like, she is not your property. Why do you think that she belongs to you? Oh my god. I could not handle Tamlin. I wanted to stab him in the face. And on top of that, this wasn't Tamlin's doing, but he kind of allowed it to happen because he was stupid. They captured Feyre's sisters. So Elaine and Nesta were in their poor nightgowns, and they were taken. So what I feared was gonna happen in the first book, when it ended up being Tamlin, my fears came to light in this book, and I was like, no. And I also did know that her sisters became fairies, but I just didn't know how. Apparently this was how. Yeah, that was a lot. That was a very intense scene. And so I'm so excited to see how Elaine and Nesta are going to, because it was obviously not their choice. I'm really excited to see how they're going to adapt and adjust to their newfound bodies, their newfound immortality, and all that stuff. So that's going to be really interesting. I know Nesta's going to be really unhappy, especially. So that's going to be fun. And then it was interesting because after he shoved Elaine and Nesta in, Lucien caught eyes with Elaine and claimed that she was his mate. So that'll also be interesting. And then we learn at the very end of the book, Feyre does that whole thing where she has that blast of light that isn't anything but light. And and she pretends that Reese was like had her captive this whole time, that, you know, forced her to be his mate, which is not how that works. But anyways, so Tamlin and the king believed her, and then she was like, okay, well, I need to go home. Tamlin, take me home. So Reese and her, I don't think they technically, they didn't like agree to this before this went down, because obviously they didn't think they were gonna get caught. But thankfully Reese caught on to what Feyre was doing when she was doing all of this, so she was kind of a distraction, and she kind of sacrificed herself to go back to the Spring Court with Tamlin, acting like she was still his betrothed, and acting like the scared little girl that needed protection from him. And thankfully Reese and the inner circle knew what she was doing, so she distracted everybody with enough time so that Mor and Reese could winnow everybody and her sisters, who are now fairies, out of there, because Cassian was in really bad shape. His wings were actually absolutely ripped to shreds, so I'm really hoping he doesn't like lose his wings. I would be so sad for him. Asriel was shot with a ash arrow and he needed help, so as soon as the 5 of them, yeah, so as soon as the 4 of them go back to the house, Amren, who stayed back, was like, what the heck happened? And so Reese explained to them, he's like, so quick little side note, yesterday I took Feyre to a priestess and I made her my high lady. So what Tamlin was saying was impossible, Reese made happen, because he makes things happen. So she is now the high lady. She is the high lady of the Night Court as a spy in the Spring Court. That was a twist I did not see coming, and I was very excited with that. So I haven't started reading the next book yet. I'm going to, like, as soon as I turn off this video and wipe off my face. But I'm gonna start this tonight, and then I will have a review up like next week, TBH. But yeah, this video is really long. Sorry to me having to listen to myself again and edit all this. Yeah, Reese is definitely my favorite character in this book. I feel like him and Feyre are literally both sides of the same coin. I think each of them are so unbelievably selfless and powerful and intelligent, and they are just, they make the absolute ultimate power couple, and I'm so excited to see what progresses of their relationship and high lord status in this next book. And I cannot wait to see, I want to see Feyre tell Tamlin, be like, yeah, by the way, I'm the high lady of the Night Court, and I want to see the shock on his face when he finds out that she's been playing him this whole time because he's been a dick. But yeah, I think that's all that I wanted to say about this book. This video is already, you know, 10 light years long. I have not talked to anybody about these books besides my one friend, so I don't know. I'm trying not to like get so much public opinion of these books, because like I said, they're either people love them or they hate them. I'm very much veering towards the love. I cannot wait to read this book. Like I said, it's becoming one of my new favorites, and I'm just really excited to get into it. And I don't want to read anybody's negative just opinions, because I saw some on Amazon and one of them was like, oh, I'm giving this 2 stars because everything was about everybody was so beautiful and everything was about wealth, and there were like sex scenes in every first of all, there was like 2, 3, like there wasn't even as much as I was expecting. But I thought that was a stupid, if you see it, it's on Amazon if you can see it. I don't know who it was, so I'm not even like trying to throw shade, but I just don't want anybody else's negative opinions to kind of impact my thoughts going into the book. So I'm going into this blind, like actually, so I'm very excited. I will be making another review when I finish this one very soon, because I'm sure I'll get through it very quickly. But yeah, like I said, please leave any comments down below. I would love to talk to any of you, and thank you all so much for watching. So I will see you in my next video. Bye.